Welcome to another edition of Red Pill, the end of humanity's simulated reality. Well, the ruinous war in Syria is one of the defining conflicts of the 21st century. What started out as anti-government demonstrations in March 2011 quickly spiraled into a Western-backed push to oust Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The more than a decade of war that followed inflicted sheer and unforgiving brutality upon the Syrian people, and as Western-backed militants sowed chaos across the country, Syria became a stomping ground for both global and regional powers. Now, the Western-backed effort to oust Assad was ultimately unsuccessful, with Russia and Iran aiding the Damascus government in regaining control over much of the territory lost to militant groups. But Syria is still smoldering. U.S. and Turkish troops continue to illegally occupy parts of the country as Israel bombs Syria with increasing frequency in recent months. Now, staying informed about what's happened and what is actually happening in Syria is not easy in an age when the mainstream media enjoys a misinformation monopoly. But there are a few critical sources of information that are still in circulation. Syriana Analysis is certainly one that you can't afford to overlook. It was launched by Kevork Almassian in 2017, and the platform is not linked to any political or corporate interests. It offers independent news and analysis on current global affairs with a particular focus on Syria. Well, we can now speak to the man himself. Kevork is joining us from the German capital, Berlin. Kevork, thanks very much for coming on the show. I know that when you launched Syriana Analysis, you were thinking about reaching possibly a couple of thousand people, and then before you knew it, you had millions of views. Why do you think that happened?
Actually, that's a very good question. When I started my YouTube channel, Syriana Analysis, I had the opportunity to connect with people around the world, especially from in the United States. But when Trump came to power and he started saying that the mainstream media is all about fake news, and he started hitting the credibility of the American mainstream media, and in extension, let's say, the European mainstream media, and he was right on this case, if we want to speak about this objectively. Many people started resorting to alternative news outlets, going to social media, and not only the Trump supporters, but everyone who is critical about the US foreign policy, for example, and those who have learned from the lessons of Iraq, Libya. So they were craving for alternative source of information, and Syriana Analysis came at the time when there was still ongoing war in Syria, and there was an existential threat against the country. So all of a sudden, I realized that many people started following Syriana Analysis. It became like a brand. So this increased, let's say, a positive pressure on myself to improve the quality of the work and start to, let's say, organize live streamings, conversations, panels, and also, most importantly, debunking the mainstream media narratives and myths. And I'm not saying that I present the 100%, let's say, accurate news and analysis on my channel, but I don't lie. This is the thing that I do on my YouTube channel, and I think the audience, they know when a journalist, a commentator, or an analyst is being honest with the audience or with the followers, because you will start establishing a track record. And after years of work, people can realize that you are being consistent, let's say, in your analysis, in your reporting about different geopolitical conflicts, and that's how you gain credibility. Thankfully, today I have over 11 million views to the videos, on the videos that I created in the past few years. And this is something that I'm proud of, but this wouldn't be possible, let's say, without cooperation with different content creators and networking, trying to build bridges, and especially with the grassroots. It's very important to respect the audience, to respect their intelligence, and try to always be consistent and tell them the truth, and only the truth, never lie about it. Sometimes you may hit or miss, because this is politics, and you may misinterpret some of the events, but the core of the issue is don't lie.
What does your success, Kevork, say about this growing thirst for real news, real analysis, real opinions about what's actually going on in the world?
It tells us lots of things. It tells us that the people are craving for real information and analysis because they have been doomed several times in the past 2 to 3 decades, starting from Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, and the ongoing genocide and onslaught against the Palestinians in Gaza. And people can see with their objective eyes nowadays, thanks to social media and the people documenting the events around the world, that what this many of the mainstream media outlets are telling them about certain events are not necessarily accurate. And they have realized that there is an embedded interest in this type of reporting, because when the funders and the oligarchs and the people who are investing in these media outlets, they themselves have an invested interest in certain geographies. Therefore, the reporting of these channels will be biased and in favor of the funder. Unlike the people, for example, working on social media and their income is directly from, for example, AdSense, or their income is directly from the donors. And when I say the donors, those are not people with corporations, for example, but rather the audience. So most of the income of Syriana Analysis, for example, comes from the people who watch the videos and the people who donate because they like the content and the reporting of the channel. Therefore, you are not under any sort of pressure from your superior or from your investor or from the founder of the channel in order to report it in a certain way or shape. However, this is also, it's a double-edged sword, because when the alternative media outlets started gaining momentum and more credibility among the general public, the censoring, the suppression and shadow banning also increased. And this accelerated after 2016, especially on YouTube, on Facebook. And all the leaked documents show clearly today that there is a collusion between the security apparatuses in the United States and the social media outlets. And therefore, many of the big accounts or big names have been either deplatformed or shadow banned, and their content is not reaching basically to the people that you want to reach to them. And this is nowadays the real dictatorship, because on one hand, they say that we respect different opinions and we will respect the freedom of press and journalism. But once you pose a serious threat to the narrative, you will be shadow banned, suppressed, deplatformed, and if you continue being influential, for example, like Julian Assange, you will be imprisoned. And there are many incidences and many people who were stopped, investigated in airports, people like myself, and their electronics were confiscated in order to suck all the data and
clearly,
see what are the
Kevork,
sources.
you don't have to be Julian Assange anymore. That's pretty obvious. You can be stopped, interrogated, jailed, even if you're just an independent freelance journalist these days. I want to talk about Syria in a second, but first I just want to ask you, do you feel like you're in danger? Are you afraid of somebody coming through your door and taking you away?
I live every day with the perception and assumption that 6 a.m. in the morning the police will break into my apartment and confiscate my electronics. That's how I live every day my life, because what I say about, for example, the Ukraine war is unpleasant for the government in Germany. And what I say about Palestine nowadays is very bothering. It's very much unpleasant, and it bothers the German government. And I have a previous experience with the German government when I spoke my mind about the Syrian war and the refugee crisis which followed the Syrian war. So I started telling the people the root cause of the refugee crisis, and the German government didn't like that. So they first sent the press, they smeared me, and they tried to commit a character assassination. And when they couldn't manage to kill my work, they threatened me with deportation from Germany and taking away my resident permit. So I had to go to court and defend my resident permit here. So this is how they work. They come after your work. They try to throw you into an economic jail. And if they don't succeed, they try to either deport you or accuse you with false allegations. I was accused of being a spy, for example, in Germany. Of course, there is no evidence for it, and there will be no evidence for it, zero. But however, truth nowadays is not really what the truth is about, but rather what the press says about you and what the government thinks of you. So it's a little bit twisted world we are living in.
far-right, pro-Assad, those are some of the labels that I've seen attributed to you, Kevork, in the mainstream media, that whole smear campaign you're talking about.